Hello, and welcome. Are you ready to lose yourself in a story of fate, dominance, and a love written in the stars? If so, you're in the right place. To my returning pack, it's good to have you back. To anyone new, I'll be your guide through the shadows. Make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't get lost. Now, before we begin, I have a question for you. What's the one thing you would risk absolutely everything for? Let me know in the comments. All right, let's begin. The scent of 1,000 wolves was suffocating, a dizzying mix of pine, wet earth, and raw ambition. My knees trembled, not from the excitement of the great mating ceremony, but from a deep weakness that was draining the life from me. I was Elara, a nobody from the borderlands, an omega whose family had lost its status generations ago. Here, surrounded by powerful alphas, betas, and their chosen mates, I was less than a ghost. My plain, homespun dress was a harsh contrast to the silks and velvets everyone else wore, a constant reminder of exactly where I stood. The alpha's ceremonial call echoed across the clearing, but it sounded warped and distant, like it was coming from underwater. My vision blurred, the bonfire in the center splintering into 1,000 glittering pieces. A wave of nausea rolled over me, and my head swam. I was just an afterthought here, present only because attendance was mandatory for all unmated females. No one would choose me. No one would even see me. My own weakness was nothing more than an inconvenience. I pressed a hand to my forehead, trying to steady myself. The air grew thick, heavy with a power so immense it felt like a physical weight on my chest. It was a new scent, one I'd never encountered before. Ozone, after a lightning strike, ancient forests, and smouldering embers. It was terrifying, and yet, somewhere deep in my soul, a dormant part of me whimpered in recognition. My wolf, a creature so shy I sometimes doubted she even existed, was stirring. The pressure intensified. The world tilted violently. Just as darkness crept into the edges of my vision, I felt myself falling. I braced for the cold stone floor, for the humiliation I knew would follow. But the impact never came. Instead, strong arms caught me. The embrace was firm, secure, but the scent, it was all wrong. It wasn't the ozone and embers that had called to my soul. This was different storm, a night, cold stone and something wild. It was a dangerous scent, and it was the last thing I knew before the world went entirely black. I woke to the feeling of softness, a luxury my body had never known. For a long, blissful moment, I was just floating in a sea of impossible comfort. The sheets felt like spun silk, and the heavy blanket over me was the finest, softest fur I could ever imagine. My threadbare dress was gone. In its place was a delicate nightgown of such fine material it felt like a whisper against my skin. My eyes fluttered open. Above me, a canopy of deep crimson fabric was held up by 4 massive carved wooden posts. The ceiling was so high it disappeared into shadow, but I could just make out the shapes of wolf sigils carved into the dark beams. A fire crackled in a stone hearth the size of my entire cottage back home, casting a warm glow across the enormous chamber. This wasn't a healer's hut. This wasn't my pack. This was a place of immense power and wealth, the kind I'd only ever heard about in stories. Panic, cold and sharp, finally cut through the fog in my mind. Where was I? Whose bed was this? I shot up, my heart hammering against my ribs. The room was silent except for the fire, but then I felt a presence, the feeling of being watched by someone who held all the power in the world. My eyes darted to a large, throne-like armchair near the fire. A figure sat there, cloaked in shadow, perfectly still. He was massive, his broad shoulders and powerful frame filling the chair. I couldn't make out his face, but I could feel his stare, an intense, possessive gaze that seemed to see right through me, down to my very soul. It was him. The scent in the air was the same one from the ceremony. Ozone, ancient forest, and embers. It filled the room, a testament to his sheer dominance. "You're awake," a voice rumbled from the shadows. It wasn't a question, it was a fact. The sound vibrated through the floor, through the bed, and deep into my bones. It was the voice of pure command, of an alpha used to absolute obedience. I flinched, pulling the fur blanket tighter. Where am I?" I stammered, my voice a pathetic squeak in the silence. "Who are you?" The figure shifted, leaning forward out of the shadows and into the firelight. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just any alpha. The raw power radiating off him, the sharp, intelligent glint in his piercing amber eyes, the chiseled lines of his face that spoke of both brutality and nobility. It could only be one person. A man whose name was whispered in hushed, fearful tones across all the territories. Riker, the Alpha King. The Alpha King stood, and the sheer scale of him was breathtaking. He was a giant of a man, moving with the silent grace of a predator. In a few long strides, he crossed the vast distance to the bed, his gaze never leaving mine. I scrambled back against the headboard, my mind reeling in terror and confusion. The Alpha King. I was in the Alpha King's bed. He stopped at the edge of the mattress, his presence so overwhelming it was hard to breathe. He didn't look angry. He looked intense, like he was looking at something he'd lost a century ago and had only just found again. "Don't be afraid, little one," he murmured, his deep voice softening only for me. "You're safe here." "Safe?" I whispered, shaking my head. "Why am I here? I fainted. A man caught me." "He did." King Riker's voice hardened, a dangerous edge creeping in as his jaw tightened. "A man who had no right to lay his hands on you. That man wasn't your rescuer. He was a thief." I stared at him, completely bewildered. "Thief? He saved me from falling." "He took what wasn't his," the king growled, the sound a low vibration of pure possession. He took another step closer, his fists clenched at his sides. "He took you." He reached out, not to grab me, but to gently push aside a lock of hair on my face. His fingers brushed my cheek, and a jolt of pure energy, a bolt of white-hot lightning shot through me. My wolf, silent for so long, howled in my mind with pure, unadulterated joy, recognition, mate. The king's eyes blazed with triumph. "You feel it, don't you? The bond, the reason you collapsed." I could only stare, my lips parted in shock. The weakness, the dizziness, it wasn't an illness. "The mating ceremony is a chaotic swirl of power," he explained, his voice low and hypnotic. "For a wolf as sensitive as yours, to suddenly be in the presence of your true fated mate for the first time, it was too much for you. The bond tried to snap into place all at once. It overwhelmed you." He paused, his gaze burning into mine. "It was my presence that made you fall, Elara, and it should have been my arms that caught you." My name on his lips sounded like a prayer, a claim. He knew my name. "That man," the king continued, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper, "the stranger who scented of storm and night, he is Silas, the alpha of the Shadow Pack, a rogue who preys on the weak. He felt the power surge when our bond flared to life. He knew what you were to me in that instant, and he took his chance. He meant to steal you right from under my nose, to take my fated queen and use you as a weapon against me." My mind was spinning. The man who I thought had saved me was an enemy? The feared Alpha King was my mate? It was impossible. I was a nobody, an omega. He was the king of all alphas. "I'm not. I can't be," I stammered, shaking my head. "You are," he stated with absolute certainty. He sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping under his weight. He was so close now, the heat from his body calling to mine. The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes. She chose you for me, and me for you. You are my mate, my Luna, my queen. I barely had a second to process the weight of his words, the monumental shift in my reality, when the heavy wooden doors to the chamber burst open with a deafening bang. A figure stood silhouetted in the doorway, blocking the light from the hall. He was tall, dressed in dark leathers, and even from across the room, I recognized him. It was the stranger. It was Silas. His scent of storm and night filled the air, a harsh intrusion into the king's space. "I've come for what is mine," Silas declared, his voice cold and sharp. His eyes found me in the bed, and a possessive, triumphant smirk played on his lips. The little Omega chose my arms to fall into. By the old laws, that gives me the right to claim her. Before I could even flinch, King Riker was on his feet. He didn't rush. He simply rose to his full, terrifying height, placing himself directly between me and the intruder. The air grew cold, crackling with an almost visible power. The fire in the hearth seemed to dim, as if the king's fury was sucking the very warmth from the chamber. His back was to me, but I could feel the unrestrained primal rage coiling inside him. "You speak of laws." King Riker's voice was deceptively calm, a low, deadly rumble that promised violence. "You dare stand in my chambers, in front of my queen, and speak of your rights." He took a slow, deliberate step toward Silas. "You touched what belongs to me. You laid your filthy hands on my fated mate. The only right you have is the right to a swift death." Silas paled slightly, but held his ground. "She's unmarked. The bond isn't settled. It's not your claim to defend yet, Your Majesty. How is the Saint meeting of this say?" The king laughed, a short, humorless sound, far more terrifying than any shout. He turned his head just enough to look at me, his amber eyes blazing with a fire that was both terrifying and thrilling. It was the look of a dragon guarding its treasure. Then, his gaze snapped back to Silas. He spoke, and his voice was imbued with the full, undeniable power of the Alpha King's command, a force no wolf could ever disobey. The words slammed into the very foundation of the castle. An absolute and unbreakable decree. She is mine. The king has made his claim, but a rival alpha is standing in his path. The battle for the fated queen is only just beginning. If you need to know what happens next, make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on for part 2. Don't forget to like this video if you felt that bond snap into place. And tell me in the comments, who do you think will win this fight? Until next time, stay wild.